Hi, hello everyone. My name is Nathan Kearns, and I'll be your moderator tonight. First and foremost, welcome to this community outreach meeting on Thursday, January 27th, 2022 for Seven Leaf Sisters Incorporated, a proposed marijuana retailer and marijuana product manufacturer. Their facility is proposed to be located at 385 Atlantic Avenue in Marblehead, Massachusetts, 01945. Today we have with us Blake Mensing as a representative for Seven Leaf Sisters. The meeting will open with a presentation on the proposed establishment, followed by an opportunity for community engagement and questions. We ask that you hold all questions until the end of the presentation, at which point I'll open the floor. And with that, I'll let Blake take it away.
Thanks very much, Nathan. Just want a quick note at the beginning here that the principal of this proposal, Angela Foster, is facing some travel-related troubles out in California while she's visiting her family. So she is unfortunately not able to join us this evening, but I will cover all the topics that are required under the state regulations. Those of you in attendance may have received a notice of a prior meeting and perhaps have heard the main presentation from Angela before. This meeting is being redone because they have a shelf life and we needed to refresh it in order to be eligible to apply to the state. So with that, I'll jump right in. This is a proposed adult use cannabis retail establishment and co-located product manufacturing establishment proposed by Seven Leaf Sisters to be located at 385 Atlantic Avenue in Marblehead, as Nathan said at the outset. The State Cannabis Control Commission regulations require that we cover a certain set of topics. The first of which is information adequate to demonstrate that the location will be maintained securely. The State Cannabis Control Commission regulations at 935 CMR 500.110 go into very granular detail about all of the bells and whistles and functionality that a security system must have. First and foremost, you have to have commercial grade locks. You have to have full camera coverage of essentially every room in the facility except for the bathroom for obvious privacy concerns. And they actually go into granular detail about the required resolution of these cameras. So they're all full HD 1080p cameras. The footage is stored for a minimum of 90 days. And each frame of that footage from any camera in the facility has to be basically freezable, legible, and then printable. And it has an irremovable date, time, location watermark to indicate which camera it was. Going a little deeper into the security, the main storage area of finished cannabis products is what's going to be known as a limited access area, otherwise known as the vault. That has some, basically beefed up physical infrastructure, full camera coverage, and there are only certain folks in the hierarchy of the entity who will have access, which again is a nod to the title itself, limited access area. So yeah, your day one employee is not going to have full access or unsupervised access to any finished product in the facility. That's a good segue into the next required topic, prevention of diversion to minors. That's obviously a huge part of this adult use industry. The first sort of gatekeeping function is actually literally a gatekeeper. In order to enter this facility, you have to be 21. You have to show a valid government ID showing that you're 21. That will get verified upon, basically at the door and then again at the checkout counter. That would actually apply even if there happened to be a Marblehead police officer who was 20 years old. You may not enter this facility if you're under 21. No ifs, ands, or buts, no exceptions, period. It's just not allowed. So that's the first sort of layer of preventing diversion to minors. They can't get in the building. The state requires also a seed to sale tracking platform known as Metric, METRC. As the name implies, it tracks the plant, the cannabis plant, from a licensed cultivator, its transport to a licensed manufacturer if it's being turned into something else, as this building is proposing, this operation is proposing to do, or if it's going to an end use retailer then for a customer to be able to buy it. So what that means is there's a digital trail of breadcrumbs on literally every cannabis product sold in the state. And there's a mechanism to figure out, if that, barcode, that unique ID ends up in a high school, well, we can figure out, again, going back to the security system, to figure out who bought that. And ultimately, it's like anything. If you're near children, this stuff needs to be kept, locked away, or up in something comparable to a high up liquor cabinet if you have younger children. Yeah, it's about personal responsibility. But the business would have the right to refuse service. So if from your seed to sale tracking sort of trail of breadcrumbs that you sold that particular product to someone and it ends up in the hands of a minor, you could ban that customer from ever coming back. It has not been a widespread problem in the state of Massachusetts, and actually there was data released in the last couple months that shows that youth usage rates have actually gone down since adult use legalization has happened. But yeah, that's the main strategy to prevent diversion of minors: knowing where your products go and preventing minors from entering the building. That applies to staff as well. You may not work in this facility if you're under 21. The state requires, in recognition of some of the harms of the failed drug war, that a cannabis licensee give back and try to make some meaningful progress to undoing some of those harms of the failed drug war. They identified 29 areas of disproportionate impact in the state, where statistically, essentially people of color and Caucasian people consume cannabis at virtually identical rates. The ACLU has run the numbers, and a person of color is 3.7 times more likely to have a run-in with the law for cannabis possession. And then the sentencing around that for people of color is significantly harsher. So what the State Cannabis Control Commission, on the back of 94G, which was the statute that was created after Question 4 voters voted in, Question 4 in 2016, was that you have to do something called a positive impact plan in order to be licensed. So what Seven Leaf Sisters has endeavored to do to satisfy the state requirement is to make an annual donation, one each for each license, to the Cannabis Center of Excellence, which is a nonprofit 501c3 that provides educational resources to people in areas of disproportionate impact. And then it's separately pursuing a cannabis research license, which will be survey-based research, essentially to gauge certain attitudes and in particular healthcare provider attitudes around cannabis and its consumption, all with sort of an abuse prevention lens. So that's the primary way they're going to try to satisfy the state's positive impact plan. On the local level, Angela Foster has already run a business in town, I believe, and the intent is to give back. She's been in Marblehead for quite some time, and I believe her children are at the high school. So, it's a local business. She's looking to figure out where, any charitable donations or volunteer hours would do the most good, on the ground in Marblehead. And I know that's her commitment. The last regulatorily required item that we must cover has to do with information, basically presenting information that's adequate to demonstrate that the location will not constitute a nuisance, as that term is defined by law. So typically, nuisance in the cannabis context has to do with odor, traffic or parking, or noise. This is a relatively small store, and there's some off-street and street parking and off-street parking available. Because of how many stores are open, we don't expect there to be lines around the block like there were for the first couple of stores that were open in the state. So that's something that they can't get away with by virtue of having a state license or a host community agreement with Marblehead. It explicitly says you have to not be a nuisance. So no license is a shield against a private right of nuisance if there is an issue. With respect to odor, this is not a cultivation facility. That's where most of the odor comes from. The manufacturing that'll be done on site is going to be very small scale, and Angela is going to be adapting her recipes for her business Kind Lab, which has a lot of topicals, so balms, salves, creams, that sort of thing. And it's going to be utilizing primarily distillate or cannabis oil. That in itself comes in beaker jar looking things that aren't emitting smell. And then the finished products that she'll sell at retail are all in child-resistant packaging that has the added effect of keeping the smell pretty contained in the packaging. And then the HVAC system itself will have a carbon filter to make sure that no air that potentially contains smell is getting just sort of belched into the community. The likelihood is, once you're in the store, you'll probably be able to smell it, but this is not something that should be emanating, through the walls or anywhere outside. It's not something you should be able to smell walking by. And yeah, there's really no noise concern. There's no loud, metal machine shop or anything. It's going to be, mixing and that sort of thing on the manufacturing side. So I've covered the location, the address, the license types, security, prevention of diversion to minors, positive impacts to the community, and how they're not going to constitute a nuisance. So with that, I'll turn it back to Nathan and open it up to any and all questions that anyone might have.
Thanks, Blake. Yeah, with this, we'll move into our community participation portion of tonight's meeting. If you have any questions or comments about the proposed site, you can use the raise hand button in Zoom to signal me. If you're attending by telephone, you can type *9 to raise your hand and wait for me to call on you. All right, first one I saw was a question from Kate Nightingale. Give me 1 second, Kate. Go ahead, Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Nightingale. I live across the street from the proposed site and at 5 Bartlett Street, been here for 25 years. And I'm going to admit I was not aware of this until recently. I did not receive any prior communication on this. And when the other site that's being discussed in town, people have been talking about, that alerted me to it. And I contacted the Board of Selectmen's office early last week. And after a few requests, they forwarded me some documentation, a PDF on, must be Angela's original proposal. Mm-hmm. Ironically, 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail about this meeting. So barring that, I would not have been aware of the meeting. The meeting isn't posted on the town's website. And when I inquired with the town why that was, they said because it hadn't been requested to be posted. So I have some concerns about the location, and I'm going to go through why. Sure. I guess I've tried to look into this a little bit and better understand the security issues. So is this somebody's going to come to the door, they're going to hit a buzzer, there's going to be a video camera, and they'll flash a state ID that can be seen from inside, and that's how they'll be let in?
I think there'll likely be a staff member standing beside the front door or just inside of it. Yeah, just you can't get into the sales floor area without demonstrating that you're of age. Okay. So yeah, I think it'll be a staff person, not a camera.
Will there be a double entry? So will you step in to a vestibule from the street where that occurs, or does that occur at the street level?
It'll be at the street. Yeah, this physical space isn't large enough to create that. That double door is known in the industry as a man trap. But the physical space isn't large for that. Okay.
And traffic, I'm well aware of the parking spaces that I think they mentioned there are 4 parking spaces. Those I assume are the ones if you're facing the building to the right. And I can tell you historically, none of the merchants in that area use those spaces. The condition of the parking lot is a mess, and it floods. So if you try to use those spaces, you end up stepping out into a flood. So I assume Angela and the landlord have plans to redo that area?
Yeah, I don't know the plans on the parking. I know there's dedicated off-street parking. That's I think if you're facing the storefront, it would be to the right.
Yes. And it's challenging parking because to get 4 cars in there, I'm not quite sure how you then back out without being in the private property of the immediately adjacent house. And those are questions I have, and it arises from, there's been a longstanding hair salon in that building. And then the deck furnish, refinishing person, then obviously the dry cleaners. And at some times in the past 25 years, that hair salon has been very busy and parking has been an issue for the neighbors. And when it's an issue is they park on the inbound side of Atlantic Avenue, very close to the corner. So when you're turning out Bartlett Street, it's a very hard turn. They park too close to the corner. They park on the other side of the street, up on the sidewalk. The sidewalk on the inbound side has been destroyed by a neighbor's construction of a stone wall, et cetera. So there are things to be addressed in the immediate location for those of us who walk there all the time, with and without dogs. So that's just something I'm very aware of, that there is an ongoing parking issue there no matter what. Bartlett Street is a no parking street. It has always been this way. The signs aren't necessarily up as they have been in the past, or well marked. So people shouldn't be parking on Bartlett Street. And that's kind of this immediate area across the street is that way. And I think the history of that is beach parking or something. Obviously, Rabbi Meyer knows all that goes out the window during the high holidays, and we're all happy to have people park on the street for those reasons. Right. The odor issue, having driven by some other facilities in the area, you do smell odor outside. I think you mentioned you should not be able to smell this.
Yes, generally the
should not was a bit of a caveat that I would like to feel a lot more comfortable about.
Sure. So the state regulations require that you control odors, as well as the state required contract with the municipality called a host community agreement. So there are odor control requirements. So excuse my phrasing. Yeah, you will not smell it. I myself actually am a minority owner of a cannabis retail store out in Holyoke. You only smell anything once you're physically in the building. So anytime you may have driven by a facility, my suspicion would be that that's a rather large scale cultivation facility where simply there are more plants on hand. And frankly, when it's growing towards the end of its life cycle, that's when it starts emitting the most odor. And then the drying and curing. So yeah, my guess, I've heard some complaints about a cultivation facility up in Lowell that apparently, sort of shortchanged their odor control. But yeah, just the simple size of this building, it's not going to be the volume of cannabis that I think is not, controllable by the industry standard carbon filtration system that's integrated into the HVAC system. And one other quick point on the traffic and parking, the host community agreement does require that Seven Leaf Sisters conduct a traffic and parking impact study, as well as traffic and parking mitigation plans. And that is required to be submitted to them 4 months, no later than 4 months prior to the commencement of operations. So that is going to get underway in the near future. Obviously, the one part of this meeting is to entitle Angela to submit to the state. I can tell you with certainty, the state will not give her an answer in terms of being anywhere close to opening within 4 months. They take their sweet time, and it is a requirement of the contract with Marblehead to furnish that study, both of those studies. Okay,
that's terrific. I think if that study were to begin tomorrow, these aren't realistic times to be conducting the study. I see Rabbi Myers on the call. The traffic that usually would be going in and out of the temple on a regular basis with the Hebrew schools and the after school programs that they have, the traffic that would historically have been going in and out of that salon I mentioned has just not been happening. So if you do a traffic study at this time, it's not really realistic. I don't know what.
So I'm certainly not a traffic engineer. My understanding of how they conduct these studies is there's sort of data that applies to the type of use that they can then do sort of real-time traffic counts when they put those little strips out or just have someone observing. So it's not just all observation based. It's called the ITE manual. and I think that stands for International Traffic Engineers, something like that. And they give you information, based on this particular use. So cannabis retail isn't a line item entry in the ITE manual that gets updated every year. And then the people who are traffic engineers use that as a baseline, and then they compare that based on, on-site traffic counts. And that's done, over a period of weeks, generally, not just sitting there for one day with a clicker. But yeah, again, the town will have the power, to review our traffic and parking impact study, as well as the mitigation plan if there's one that's required, as a result of the results of those studies.
Okay, thank you. I just thought of something else. And is there a recording? Is there something available? I guess that looks like the prior time you had a meeting of this nature was May, maybe, of
Correct.
2020, and it looked like 40 some people were
Yep.
involved, as opposed to the small turnout tonight.
Yep.
I'd love to hear what other people questions I'd asked, if I could.
Yeah, if you put your email in the chat function, or you can send it to me directly. My email is blake@mensinggroup.com, and that's MENSING group.com. We do have basically a private law firm YouTube channel that I don't think anyone actually ever looks at, but yes, we have a recording of that meeting and we'll be happy to share it with you.
And then last of all, are there considerations about the proximity of this to the temple and the children's programs there?
Yeah, so state law requires a 500-foot buffer from a public or private K through 12 school. There's no prohibition or buffer required, basically, from where children might be. My understanding is that the principal here, Angela Foster, has had multiple discussions with Rabbi Meyer. I see that he's in attendance if he wants to weigh in. But yes, I believe that has been raised. And again, that no people under 21 will be allowed in. I think a child walking by would see, just a regular storefront. They're not allowed to have neon or pictures of weed leaves or Bob Marley or anything like that. So it should be, just the entity name, and it shouldn't be something that children will pay much attention to. But yeah, if Rabbi Meyer wants to chime in, feel free.
Yeah, I'm gonna unmute Rabbi Meyer really quick to let him chime in as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just so you know, Kate and everybody else, we have been in discussion with Angela and the team regarding the hours, even that the store will be available, so that it won't conflict with our Hebrew school programming, with religious worship and such. And so they've been upfront and willing to discuss with us how they structure their hours in consideration for our school programming in particular, which we appreciate.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rabbi.
And Kate, if you have any other questions, happy to answer them. I do see one other hand up, but yeah, happy to answer.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Go ahead.
My name's Andrew Garnetz. I'm also on Bartlett Street. Also had a few questions. A lot of it Kate touched on, but I just had a few more of my own I wanted to just kind of run through. One was on deliveries, logistics and hours of deliveries coming in. Has that been, thought about?
Yeah, so anyone who's delivering a cannabis product has to randomize the delivery schedule. So it's not going to be something I can say it will happen only at this time, just for security purposes. There is, I believe, if I recall correctly, in the host community agreement saying that any deliveries have to happen in sort of off rush hour hours. So it's not going to be an additional, and let me be clear, it's not like it's an 18-wheeler. I know that would be probably not able to fit in that particular corner of the town. So yeah, it will be likely a Sprinter van, sort of, one of those ubiquitous, electrician plumber van sized things. And yeah, that is governed very tightly by the Cannabis Control Commission. So yeah, I can't tell you with specificity when the deliveries will happen. But just know that when they do, there are rigid protocols about how you manifest it while you're receiving it. You weigh each individual product on camera that the Cannabis Control Commission can review at any time. And then they sort of, bringing it into the back door or front door, as the case may be, would be happening at different times just during normal business hours. And I'd say probably you're looking at about a weekly delivery. This won't be daily.
Okay, so normal business hours, we're not talking early mornings and late night?
Correct.
And then just to echo Kate on the parking, with that parking lot, if you haven't seen that, that is a very tough lot to fit 4 cars in. So with, having, I'm assuming there'll probably be 2 employees there at all times?
Probably more like 4 to 6 is my guess. Again, the square footage of the footprint is not enormous. You'll need, obviously, cashiers. There'll be an inventory specialist. And likely a general manager. So I'd say closer to 4 to 6 people on a shift. I wouldn't imagine that ever be as few as 2.
Yeah, so I really don't see how parking could be a non-nuisance with having, at least 6 cars there. But I look forward to seeing the parking study, to take a look at the traffic study there. And then my last one was, so you're saying that you don't expect the big lines around the block, which I, generally kind of agree with, but what would be the plan, if there is, for those first, few weeks that it's open? Has there been a kind of contingency plan for what would be done?
I'm just taking a look back at the host community agreement. I believe we did discuss that. Let's see here. So yeah, some of the early stores had a period of time where it was appointment only. Just for context, today as we sit here, there are approximately 200 brick and mortar retail stores open throughout the state. So yeah, opening weekend of November of 2018, where the lines were around the block, was simply because it was the first set of stores. 2 stores opened the same weekend, first on the East Coast. So people drove from as far as Georgia, I heard, to do that. So yeah, that would be a great problem to have. It's not going to happen just because of how many are open. I'm just checking back here. Just bear with me for 1 second here. Yeah, there's no appointment only required, but there's an ongoing obligation, both in terms of being responsive to the neighbors and the town if concerns about sort of queuing comes up. It would be the same as if it was, a record store or a shoe store. You can't have people, invading the public space that is the sidewalk. So that's just sort of a baseline obligation that any business would have to find and adhere to. So yeah, I don't think there's any appointment only required, but it would fit into the category of you're not allowed to be a nuisance. And yeah, my store in Holyoke, we've never had a line out the door because we opened a little less than a year ago. So yeah, I think it's just a simple diffusion of other available stores. The population in Massachusetts of adults that admit to consuming cannabis regularly is 21%. So if you look at the population of Marblehead, you can expect around 21% of the people to be potential customers. Although of course, with the legal ability to grow your own at home, with limits, not everyone will do their shopping at a store like this. So yeah, I don't predict or anticipate that there'd ever be a situation where there are lines around the door, around the block. But yeah, if that were to ever happen, there are mechanisms both under the host community agreement and basically the general prohibition under the Cannabis Control Commission regulations to not be a nuisance, where someone could say, hey, that's a nuisance, and then the business would be obligated to address it.
Okay. And then I thought I read that there was like a 3% tax that goes right to the town of Marblehead that's dedicated to it. Has it been discussed what that would be used for?
So it's a retail tax. It's a local option tax that Marblehead basically opted into. In meeting with the town brass, I don't recall them sort of telling us where they'd go with that. That money goes into the general fund. There's a separate 3% or up to 3%, excuse me, of gross revenues that could be used to offset any reasonably related impacts from the facility's
Yeah,
operation.
that's the 3% I was talking about with the
Oh,
the
my
offset.
apologies. So yeah,
Yeah, no, it's okay.
there are two 3%. Yeah, there's a retail tax, and that one, no one gets to sort of choose how to spend it except the powers that be at town hall. The community impact fee is, again, up to 3% of gross revenues to offset reasonably related impacts. So if for whatever reason it was determined that this store, caused some sort of traffic issue, the kind of things that money is meant to reimburse the town for would be, adding a stop sign or a traffic light, or, I don't know the geography well enough to say what would make sense, but things like that to again minimize any impacts. So yeah, that is, cost incurred because of this store's operation. The town legally has the right to collect up to 3% of gross revenues for anything that comes from that facility's operation. Okay.
And then last one, somewhat related. Has there been any thought about security in the neighborhood? This facility may be attracting burglars or anything, and then while they're here, they see nice houses in the area and want to kind of take a stab at them.
So it's actually the opposite effect. Because of the state's strict regulations, this facility has to have more security infrastructure and apparatus than a bank or a pharmacy. And essentially what ends up happening is, there'll be camera coverage on the inside, and there's commercial grade locks and camera coverage that doesn't intrude on anyone else's privacy, but exterior cameras that make it so no one can sort of sneak in. There's only been one instance that I'm aware of in this state where anyone dared to break into a cannabis retail establishment, and that was actually during some rioting in Boston. So I would say that the likelihood of that is pretty low, and truthfully, if there happen to be any criminals listening, wow, you are going to get caught, because there's just no way to escape the cameras. And then again, each product has its own unique identifier to show where it came from. So yeah, crime tends to actually go down in a neighborhood with a cannabis retail establishment. I do have a client from Arizona who received a letter that he framed from the local sheriff. He had a store, quote unquote, on the wrong side of the tracks, and it became known to the criminal element as a no crime zone because the operator there shared that video footage if there were a crime. And that's a commitment that Angela has made to Marblehead Police. If there's anything that the camera picks up in the neighborhood, someone doing graffiti or something, that would be something that they would voluntarily share with the police. So yeah, it tends to be a net neutral or downturn in crime because of that required surveillance.
All right, I see we might have one more, another question from Kate, so I'm going to hand it over to her real quick.
I think Andrew's question was coming more from the perspective of, I've always referred to this as the anonymous corner of town and love living here for that reason. You come and go, you just don't, you see the people you want to see, but you just, you say you live on Bartlett Street, 3/4 of people in Marblehead say, where's that? So I think he's just saying, okay, all of a sudden, this is all going to be a lot more visible and a lot more, traffic in the neighborhood. Nobody wants to report a nuisance to anybody. And the way we handled it in the past with the salon was, just go in there and bring it to their attention that somebody's parked right at the corner and we can't get out of the street, and it's handled. This, I don't think we could handle the same way. I wouldn't choose to. And I don't want to be the nudge calling the police when there's a nuisance. So I think it would have to be understood that we're going to have a very good channels of communication with Angela.
So I represent a lot of people. I can unequivocally say that Angela is a genuine sweetheart, right? She lives in Marblehead. Her kids are in the high school. She is very approachable. I think she's just genuinely a kind person. So I think you should feel comfortable talking to her directly. She has never given me any glint that she would be evasive if someone had a concern. She is a good egg in my estimation. And yeah, I think, just take the chance to opportunity to speak with her. I think you'll come away feeling the same way. She's genuine, honest, hardworking. And yeah, I don't think she'd ever be, like some of these big corporate operators who you could never reach an actual human being. She's invested in the community because it is her community. So yeah, I encourage you to reach out to her. I don't anticipate problems, but if there were one, I know she wouldn't run from it, and she'd do what she could to address it as quickly as humanly possible. And I know I'm just some lawyer saying that, but really, truly, she's a good egg.
Do you have any other questions, Kate?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much for attending and your questions, Kate. I appreciate it.
And yeah, Angela did want everyone who attended tonight to know that they can feel free to reach out to the brand on Facebook. I'm about to post a link to their Facebook page in the chat, but feel free to look up Seven Leaf Sisters on Facebook as well if you would like to contact them. All right, last call for questions in the community participation portion tonight. Not seeing anything. Going once, going twice. All right, I think that with that, we'll conclude tonight's community outreach meeting for Seven Leaf Sisters. Thank you all for attending and have a good night.
Appreciate your time, everyone. Have a good evening.